Yeah, so today we have a very special guest with us once again. Obviously, following on from the conversation that we had last week with Dr. Darrell Ray, great conversation that we had that we had there surrounding religious trauma, not syndrome. Obviously, Dr. Darrell Ray pointed that one out to me. So, religious trauma, uh, yeah, just religious trauma. So today we're going to follow that conversation on with a guest that we've had on the show before, but sadly you weren't able to see his face last time. But this time he's managed to fix his camera, which is fantastic. So I'd like to welcome Matthew Sabantine. How are you doing today, Matthew?
I'm doing really well, Katie. Do you want me to call you Katie or Borg Skeptic?
I'm easy either way. Call me
Okay.
whatever, whichever you like.
Alrighty. Well, Katie, it is a pleasure being with you today. My name is Matthew Sabantine. I am the author and editor of the Common Caveat, and as you can see behind me, that is my picture. That is my logo. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. Um, where else can you find me? You can find a few TikTok videos, but I'm not too proud of those TikTok videos. But just mainly Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Uh, just search for the Common Caveat, and you can find me in those places. So, about a little bit about what I do for the Common Caveat. Some topics that I wish to uh, perfect, or I guess I don't know if I want to say become an expert in. Well, just some topics that I really want to. I guess really perfect over my lifetime would be these topics of unexplained experiences that cause people to believe in supernatural phenomenon or a deity. I'm very interested in the psychology of that. I'm interested in the psychology and biology of morality, why humans believe in good versus evil. I'm interested in the psychology and biology of the nature of consciousness and mind. And then I'm interested in the debate on evolution versus creationism. And then lastly, I'm very interested in the topic of the psychology of self-help behind religious teachings. So why do preachers and pastors, why do they say what they say to get people to believe in God, to think that they need a God to cope with life and find meaning? I'm interested in stuff like that. Um, and most importantly, I'm interested in using empirical data. I'm interested in using insights from psychology, neuroscience, cognitive science, and general human biology to understand these things. And so one of the subtopics of those five main interests of mine would be this topic of religious trauma and childhood indoctrination.
Yes, that's definitely
So,
what I wanted to talk about today. Obviously we had an in-depth conversation on the last show that you were on about the other topics that you mentioned there. So I would obviously suggest to anyone who wants to hear more about what Matthew does to go back and watch the previous show, which I will leave a link in the description. So please do check that out. But today, obviously, as you mentioned, Matthew, we were wanting to talk about childhood indoctrination mainly. As I've mentioned many times, I feel it it's abuse in quite a few senses of the word of abuse. So I would like to delve a little bit deeper into that, and I understand that you've been doing a bit of research into this in preparation.
yeah, yes. But, so before we get into it, I just want to briefly, but more, I want to briefly define indoctrination, but include some more details, important details.
Yeah.
Um, So here's my understanding of what indoctrination means. It means to use persistent instruction to instill specific ideas, attitudes, cognitive strategies, or professional methodologies into a person. Indoctrination is a process. Now, I took that definition from Wikipedia. I know some people
Hmm.
will disagree with me doing that, but for the sake of simplicity and conciseness, I would just like to steal from Wikipedia there real quick. I find it interesting that professional methodologies would be included, because typically when I think of indoctrination, I don't think of professionalism very much, and I don't think of I don't typically I don't think of it as being methodical. I think of it as being very rigid and not self-correcting.
Hmm.
What do you think?
Well, I would agree with the with the definition there. That is quite a good definition. So I don't think, firstly, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking that from Wikipedia. For the purposes of this conversation, that is a good definition to be working off. And I mean, I'm not 100% certain I agree with the second point about the professionalism, because I find that there is quite a lot of professionalism in modern day indoctrination, especially within religion.
Hmm.
There is a very methodical way of doing it, especially when you're dealing with fundamental churches like that of Jehovah's Witnesses, which I grew up with.
Okay.
And there is a very strong methodology there. In fact, they actually put you through training courses on how to indoctrinate.
Right, right. Um, so I find it important to make a distinction between, what these definitions actually mean, and then what my feelings are about
Okay.
them currently, and before going into discussing them. So before I did my research, I had that image in my head that indoctrination lacks professionalism. But I actually do agree with you now that a lot of professionalism is involved, and the people who do this, they obviously have to be very smart in order to accomplish their goals with the people or children that they're teaching. So let's go further here. In 1832, the word indoctrination was first defined as to mean, quote, to imbue with an idea or opinion. Now, if you look up the word imbue, imbue, I understand to mean it has a lot of intensity to it. You give somebody a lot of passion behind the idea or opinion that you give them.
Yeah.
However, it is not totally clear to me when indoctrination took on its nasty and scary connotations, but matters of doctrine have caused discord and difficulties going back to the days of antiquity, which were many, many centuries ago. Um, and we see that with Titus, forgive me if I pronounce his name wrongly, but Titus Lucretius Carus in the first century BCE. He can be quoted as saying, "What is food to one is to others bitter poison." So, um, just to finish my point real quick, so when we define indoctrination like that, I think many of us would say it is not bad in all cases, but we still cringe when we hear the term. Obviously, because I think a lot of people here in America, maybe the same can be said about people in your country. A lot of us have just been exposed to so many bad cases of indoctrination that we tend to associate that term with badness.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think I would also have to say that maybe indoctrination, just using it vaguely, is probably the wrong way to go about it, because there probably is certain instances where indoctrination is maybe a good thing that I'm missing out on with my upbringing and the fundamentalist indoctrination that I was engaged in. Which I think is where we need to draw the line, is when it's part of a fundamental doctrine where it is very, it can become very nasty, that indoctrination. There is a difference between that and, say, something like being indoctrinated into something like the Methodist Church or the Protestant Church or a political regime, or something like that.
Right. Yeah. And I really appreciate your mentioning about your upbringing with the Jehovah's Witnesses and fundamentalist teachings, because I also was raised in a fundamentalist environment. I was sent to a private school. I was taught six-day Earth creationism, stuff like that. But I real quick, I just want to comment on Focus on the Family. If you've ever heard of them, they are an evangelical conservative Christian entity. I believe that they are widely known here in America. What's funny about them is even they cringe at the use of the term indoctrination.
Okay.
However, or should I say, they seem to not like the term based on this article I found from them. However, they will not agree to associating indoctrination with teaching children on how they should think about God. So they strongly believe in the freedom and the liberty and the value, the utility of teaching children exactly how to think about God. Focus on the Family agrees that kids are entirely dependent on their parents and cannot be led in the right direction unless someone leads them. They are highly concerned about making sure they are not too late in reaching out to kids when they are impressionable and curious enough. The pre-adolescent years are the best years, according to Focus on the Family. There is only a small window of exploitable time during which you can teach the children what you want him or her, or teach the child what you want him or her to learn.
I think that's quite a good definition of religious indoctrination.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is there. What are your thoughts on that? On what they've said there?
Well, first of all, I got to have empathy for them in regard to the fact that they want to lead children in the right direction. They want to get a hold of children when they're curious and they're ripe and ready. I think, to be honest with you, all of us want to get a hold of our children and lead our children in the right direction at the right time. We don't want to leave our children out there floundering. So it's understandable that Focus on the Family would want to follow this instinct, because they even say in this article that for those who do not believe in something, they will fall for anything. I think that part of them is not too it's not too questionable. The questionable part is basically, what is the evidence for what they believe in and what they're teaching? That's really the problem.
Yes.
So furthermore, indoctrination, it seems to me like indoctrination in of itself is amoral or non-evil or non-good. It becomes a problem because of how we humans use it.
Yes.
So as a social species, humans are shaped by culture and by their parent-child relationship, which implicitly involves indoctrination. If, as a child, you are hardwired to believe in everything your parents tell you until you can begin claiming some semblance of independence in adolescence. So in many ways, indoctrination is vital to building tight-knit, stable, supportive communities of shared values. Imagine what it would be like if none of us shared the same values at any point in time. Imagine if we could never agree on anything at any time. We would have more chaos than we already have. So in many ways, persistent instruction, inculcation, memorization, repetition, and blind trust for the teacher is needed for order and accomplishments and advancements to be made in life in general. So indoctrination, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to just jump in there on the part that troubles. Like, I would agree with quite a lot of that, but the part that gets me is the blind trust, and I think
Okay.
that's the important part when we're talking about indoctrination. About, it is amoral, like you said. It's neither good nor bad. It's
Yeah.
until you're throwing in things like blind trust, because at this point, yes, it is correct for parents to educational institutions to be teaching children things when they're children. I mean, that just makes sense, and that is the right way to do it. But it's when you're teaching those children, making them believe things that you have no reasons for making them believe. You need to be able to teach kids, well, this is the way you do things, and this is the reason why you do it this way. You need to give them
Yes.
reasons so that they understand why it is that they're doing things a certain way.
Right.
And I don't see religions doing that. Religions are saying, believe this. Why? Well, because it's the truth. That's it. I've got no way to prove it's the truth, but it's the truth, so that you've got to believe it.
Right. They have the appeal to authority fallacy happening there. That's a huge part of the problem. I really respect your apprehension about blind trust. And I do too. But the reason why I guess I still included that is because it seems like children, the nature of children, if we agree on the premise that children are hardwired to believe in whatever their parents tell them, perhaps it would be impossible to expect them to have anything but blind trust. Unless we can prove that kids do have some capacity for being critical thinkers. I imagine that there probably is data out there to contradict my point there, because we do have a lot of smart children out there. Um, However, we do. There are some things that we need our children to know and remember and believe without question. Some very basic things like don't kill, don't steal, don't throw a lit match on gasoline, stuff like that. Um,
Oh, of
but
course.
of course, yeah. But the thing with religion is that it gets into more thorny issues that are just way too assumptive and do not include any evidence. And like you said earlier, they just want kids to, just jump on a bandwagon. For instance, the Earth was created in 6 days. Jesus Christ died for your sins. You'll go to hell if you are gay, if you are bisexual. You will go to hell if you masturbate. Stuff like things like that. Those are the things that we want kids to question, because those things, if they're not questioned, if they're left not critically examined, there could be terrible consequences for kids. So I think in that regard, blind trust does become a problem.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a couple of times there, critical thinking and thinking critically about things, and that's
Yes.
something that is counterintuitive to the religious indoctrination that we see.
Yes.
They try to teach things in a way that doesn't encourage any form of critical thinking. This, the higher indoctrination that a religion has, like Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, the religious cults,
Yes.
the less critical thinking there is, and the less that it's encouraged. And in some
Yes.
cases, like Jehovah's Witnesses, it's outright admonished. There's no way that you're going to have critical thinking. They'll even publicly speak about how bad critical thinking is and
Right.
how you
Right.
shouldn't have that.
And so I guess I'm going to try to figure out how I can segue into my next point here, because I want to jump past some of these
Hmm.
notes that I made. So critical thinking is very important for many, many, many reasons. It's great brain exercise for one thing. You need to be taught critical thinking at a young age, so that when you become an adult, you're capable of finding things that are wrong in everyday life, whether it be in the workplace or among your friends, um, or wherever. So
Hmm.
I think the source of our moral offense when we look at indoctrination is, um, we find our moral offense with the teacher. So why is the teacher teaching what they're teaching? What are they gaining from it? Most importantly, the reason why we want to teach people anything at all ever is so that they have something valuable and practical to help them work in society and integrate themselves with society and just basically contribute in necessary ways. So I think that's really ultimately the goal of why we teach anybody anything. And so we can't accomplish any of those goals without evidence-based things. So I think a lot of us have blamed indoctrination as a cause for the problem after we finally awoke to the fact that what we were taught is wrong and nonsensical when we were children. So as a result, we have felt betrayed and lied to. We discovered that information. We discovered counter information against what we were taught, and we felt that our teachers withheld the counter information from us. We sensed ulterior motives. At least that's how it felt from my experience. How was it for you?
Yeah, I would definitely agree that and this isn't just coming from me. I mean, the many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses I've spoke to feel exactly the same. It's that it is a betrayal. You put that blind trust, like we mentioned earlier. You put that blind trust into these authority figures, and then you find out that the whole time they were telling you falsehoods, and then not giving you the tools to be able to critically analyze those falsehoods.
Exactly.
Which is a betrayal. But I mean, then that leads into whether or not you can count it as a betrayal in some senses, because the people who are indoctrinating you also are being betrayed. So this is a systemic problem within religions.
Yes. It's not like the indoctrinator, like you said, the indoctrinator is also being betrayed. So it's not like they are knowingly evil or trying to be evil. It's not like this is not a bad guy versus good guy situation. It's a situation, it's systemic. It's a systemic flaw that we all have to work together to fix. So real quick, I just want to get into probably the second problem here. So as secularists versus religionists, we are all up in arms about the clear differences and boundary lines between education and indoctrination. At this point, those lines and differences are unidentified and unclarified. As long as we keep saying that, quote, indoctrination lies in the eye of the beholder. So people who are in support of education want the freedom to choose from a selection of options regarding what is true and what is false. We do not get that from fundamentalist evangelical Christianity or any fundamentalist evangelical religion at all today, as long as they cling to the idea that committed belief to their sacred texts, or in the case of Christians, the Bible, is the only way to have a right relationship with God, the divine, or the supernatural, or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now. Oh, okay. You just stop me at any point in time if you want to comment on anything, because I do got a lot here. I don't want to talk too much.
No, I think the points you're coming out with are absolutely fantastic, and you've obviously put a lot of research into this. So I just want to let you, get out what you've put together.
Okay. So, all right. Let's go. Let me say now. A lot of people could argue that something similar happens in the secular public schools. And I think this is important to mention because we need to identify this weakness. If we don't identify this weakness, the fundamentalists they might have a rightful place to accuse us. So in public schools, kids cannot get passing grades unless they consent to and memorize certain purported facts, quote unquote. The shame and embarrassment of not getting satisfactory grades could arguably force kids against their consent to accept ideas they otherwise would not accept. Mm-hmm. However, if we agree that is unfair, that does not have the same level of unfairness as threatening someone with corporal punishment in the afterlife or upsetting God in this earthly life, as a result of failure to accept religious teachings. The clear difference here is this. Formal secular formal secular indoctrination threatens you with the shame and embarrassment of failing grades. Religious indoctrination threatens you with the prospect of corporal punishment or angering God. Take your pick.
Yeah, I think that is a key part to it, and and yes, public schools, that it is indoctrination. But the key difference, as we mentioned earlier, is the critical thinking aspect of it.
Right.
They're not telling you, oh, you have to memorize this without reasons, and they are encouraging you to critically think about the information and assess its truth yourself.
Yes.
So that's a major difference. So and then not to mention, as you mentioned there about the religious indoctrination, you've got that eternity in hell, or angering God and not being in His good graces or something like that, which is a way greater punishment than, oh, your friends are going to laugh at you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Real quick, how much time do we have left?
About half hour.
Okay. So I'm trying to think if maybe I want to skip ahead to the next part. Oh no, okay, I still got plenty of time to finish this one here. Okay, so just to compare again, the religious indoctrination system versus the secular indoctrination system. So, if the current secular indoctrination system is unhealthy, inaccurate, inefficacious, and undesirable for children, we will figure it out and change it to better suit the children as the scientific method dictates. Religious indoctrination will never do that. Religious indoctrination states that we must stick to the course no matter how much it hurts, or does not work, or does not prove itself to be philosophically and scientifically true. The secular indoctrination system states that it will update its curricula with every stage of updating knowledge in the field of new discoveries. The religious indoctrination system does the opposite. It never updates itself with new understandings of facts. It remains on its insular island and does not jive with the rest of the mainstream culture. The secular indoctrination system admits that knowledge is progressive and that we are in constant need of being updated on facts. The religious indoctrination system insists that it is dogmatically, inescapably, and omnipotently right about certain things that no one could ever change.
Completely agree. Completely. And that is a big problem, and we see that there's doctrine within Christianity, for instance, which has been around and being proven wrong for hundreds of years, and yet we still, we're still told that, oh, it's absolutely true.
Well, it's absolutely true. That's what they say. I think the other problem is, is the fact that, well, people in religion, they're constantly coming out with new books, and they'll never stop. And they have brilliant marketing schemes. They really know how to appeal to their audience. They really know how to appeal to just the part of the brain that gets tired from employing critical thinking all the time. If that makes any sense. I think a lot of religious doctrine, of course, it appeals to a lot of emotion.
Oh, of course.
So
I was reading a study on that actually a couple of months back, and there's two networks at play. So when we're talking about indoctrination, we're not so much talking about the emotion networks that are at play there. That is more the logical networks which are at play in the indoctrination. What the emotions do is they prop up the logical centers, so they make the illogical seem logical. And there's neuroscientists who studied this phenomena of how how emotion actually plays into religion, and it's a very powerful tool that they've got to use.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with the idea that, emotion is used to prop up the logic, to make to make illogical things appear logical. And it's very hard to undo all of that. And I've got to admit that even I myself, I'm still in the process of undoing all of those years of inculcation and indoctrination and fundamentalism.
Yeah, I feel. I mean, I'm in the same position. I'm still, recovering. But I think it's a process that'll never end. There's always going to be parts of the indoctrination that's still going to stick with you.
Right.
Up until the day that you die. There's always, like, especially like this last year with the pandemic hitting. There was a lot of people, I myself included, who had left religions such as Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormonism or what have you, and we got that thought when the pandemic hit. It was involuntary. It was like, oh my God, it's here. We're all gonna die. That's it.
Yeah.
Armageddon's here, or God's calling us up to heaven, or something. But it was maybe like a few seconds, but you had that thought, which was involuntary, before your logical centers kicked in and went, bloody hell, we've had pandemics. We always have pandemics. What's so
Right.
different about this one? But so it's something that'll always stay with us, and that's one of the things. That's why I think it's abuse, is because there's thoughts which are clearly untrue, which clearly have no evidence to back them up, but that are so I love the word you used earlier on, imbued, so imbued into you that they are going to affect you for the rest of your life.
Right.
And against your will, against your knowledge, against what you know to be true, and that's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely get that. However, at the same time, I think on some level we all will grapple with this until the day that we die. Um, this recovery process, but at the same time, I think that we all can still have hope that we can achieve certain levels of healing wherein we don't have to worry about backpedaling anymore.
Yes.
So there are just some things about religion that we know to be false. However, there are still a lot of the unknowns, just about life, that haunt us. For instance, you talked about the pandemic, and when the pandemic hit, there was a few seconds during which you had worried, oh, is God coming back now? Is Armageddon starting? Is the rapture happening? The apocalypse is here. Of course, you get all of those science fiction images running through your mind, um, and just your fear really kicks up. All of that's going to happen before you have some time to really sit down and think for a while, and to really rationalize things. It takes a while for your critical the part of your brain that's in charge of critical thinking. It takes some time for that to fully come online, so to speak.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. The emotional side is a lot quicker. You're not you're reacting in those situations, and it's usually the religious side of you that's reacting the before that critical thinking kicks in.
right, right. So I find it very funny and coincidental that you mentioned about Daryl Ray, Dr. Daryl Ray,
Hmm.
um, at the beginning of the show because I actually had been watching some of his videos these past few days, and I was really inspired by this one video, this one discussion that he did on the toxic traits of religion, and how they really taint our view of sex. So
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ray is an American organizational psychologist, and he is the president of Recovering from Religion. And by the way, Recovering from Religion is a support network of very well trained psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists who are available 24/7 to give aid to anybody who's trying to basically leave religion and they're trying to start a new life. And so Dr. Daryl Ray, he talks about three specific religious beliefs, which, when they are combined, they create toxic and anxious feelings about sex. Belief number one is basically the belief in an afterlife. This is not toxic in of itself, but it becomes toxic when combined with other things. And the reason why it in of itself is not toxic is because, in the context of sex, you can think that there's an afterlife wherein orgies take place and you can have sex in whatever way that you want to, or however you want to. So having that freedom, it doesn't having the freedom to think about sex in that way in the afterlife would render the afterlife not exactly toxic in of itself. But does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so then here's the second belief. It is a belief in a deity who monitors sexual activities, whether voyeuristically or not. Now, again, this belief alone cannot be toxic when it becomes toxic when combined with other things, and the reason why it's not toxic alone is well, let's consider the fact that the authors of Greek mythology, they must have been comfortable with writing stories about their gods having sexual pleasures while overseeing society. However, I got a note. I wonder if they were bothered by Zeus's cavalier attitude towards female sexuality as manifested in serial rape and seduction. Um, so what do you think about that one?
Um, well, I don't really have any thoughts on it per se. I mean, I'm not the best person to talk to about sexuality, but being asexual and everything. But I would be interested to find out from a historian though about the what you were mentioning there about Greek mythology and how comfortable they were with serial rape and that within their surrounding their gods, because
Right, right.
that is an interesting point.
It is an interesting point. I'm hoping just so the audience is not confused. I feel considering what neuroscience and psychology says on rape and things like that. I imagine that people back then they were really bothered by that. They were traumatized by it. But if it was normal back then, it was probably really hard to uproot that back then. But the
Yeah.
reason, I tried looking for further insights on Greek mythology since Dr. Daryl Ray mentions in his talk that the Greek gods, they were always having sex, and they took pleasure in watching humans have sex. Now, of course, I believe that all of that is imaginary. It was
hmm
imaginary in the minds of the Greek people, but the fact that they had to think up this stuff about their gods, it's more telling about the minds of the Greek people than it was the gods.
I think it's
So,
quite telling about their society as well, in a sense. I mean, if
yes,
they're writing that about their gods, that's the fantasies that they're writing about,
right,
believing it
right.
to be true. Then it says quite a lot for the society that, was the a big problem with rape within the society? Was that something which was systemically correct within their society? Um, I mean, maybe I'm trying a little bit too much into that, but
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that if I am too. I just kind of like I wanted to really draw. I really wanted to get more information on that Greek society since Daryl already mentioned about it. But he goes on about this about belief number two, and why in of itself it is not exactly toxic because it all depends on how you believe your God is monitoring your sexual activity. Is your God getting sexual pleasure from watching you himself, or is he monitoring you to make sure that you're doing the right sexual acts? Um, more context is needed behind that, but Daryl Ray adds more context to that with belief number three. So now we get into the whole point of this. Toxic sexuality and religion gets created when we combined belief number three with the two others that I mentioned. Belief number three is believing in an overseeing deity that requires that a specific sexual behavior be performed or unperformed to the exclusion of all others in order to gain entry into the afterlife. And and some of the, I'm going to discuss some of the best
Hmm.
examples of these toxic belief structures about sex. We quite often find them in patriarchal religions like Islam, Mormonism, Christianity, and etc. and so forth. Maybe Hinduism, maybe Buddhism, but definitely I think it's Islam, Christianity, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
Um, Toxic beliefs about sex cause us to make self-tormenting associations between sex and death. If we fear damnation and punishment as a result of doing any condemnable sexual act. Some examples would be anyone can feel anxiety and trepidation about masturbation if they sincerely believe that they can go to hell for masturbating. That's one example. Another example is people who are non-heterosexual can fear humiliation, stigma, and ostracism from their in-group for being caught in a non-heterosexual act. Another example, if you sincerely believe that Jesus will return at any moment, you do not want Jesus to arrive at the moment you are masturbating or doing any kind of sexual act that your brothers and sisters in Christ consider condemnable. Um, and I believe this is very relevant to adolescents who are highly susceptible to bad anxiety about sex,
Hmm.
since they are very impressionable at their age because of their heightened sensitivity, because of the heightened sensitivity in their reward related neural circuitry. Though adolescents are at the stage of claiming independence from their parents, they could still depend on their parents' beliefs about sex related damnation and punishment if those anxieties were installed at any pre adolescent stage when they were programmed to believe in whatever their parents told them. So, and just to point out, again, a lot of this stuff we find in fundamentalism, which tells you that
Yeah.
this is true and this is right, no matter what you say or no matter what anybody else says. We're not going to consider any counter information or counter evidence against this because uh, all of that stuff is from the devil. Especially when I was growing up, I was always told that secular information or secular sex education is definitely from the devil, because I was told that I had to practice abstinence. Abstinence was the only option. And if I ever faced temptation to have sex outside of marriage, I was sinning against God,
Mm.
and I was living in sin. So
Yeah, and then that that does not help self-esteem or anything, which is usually quite low in adolescence to begin with, and
right,
then you throw that into the mix, and you're just hampering the growth of the mental growth of adolescents, and hampering them from becoming uh, fully functional adults. And especially within the fundamentalist church, like what we're talking about here, I was looking at figures on Jehovah's Witnesses and ex Jehovah's Witnesses and things like that, and the amount of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who leave in adolescence after, so they're still, going through this heavy indoctrination, like we're talking about, who then go on to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Because they can't get past the anxiety and the stress that is caused through the indoctrination process, and a lot of that probably relates to this sexual indoctrination that we're talking about here, and so I can definitely see what Daryl's getting at about how toxic that can actually be psychologically to a person, and when it's leading to severe depression and anxiety and suicide in some cases, then that's extremely toxic.
Right. Yes, definitely. I definitely agree. I believe that the suicide rate is high among those who you have described. It's a very saddening thing. And I'm hoping that having discussions like this, discussions about facts, can help some people. They can take it and use it to counteract the false teachings that they received.
Exactly. And I was thinking back to a point that you made earlier about the sexuality and within the gods of Greece, and
Okay.
the rape aspect of it. And I was thinking, back then it was sort of normal for rape to take place. It was sort of expected. It was you could have called it a systemic problem back then. The system sort of fueled it was the idea that rape wasn't that bad. They like to sweep it under the rug, sort of thing. Whereas now, obviously, we look back and you think about rape now, and it's terrible. It's an awful act, which it is, obviously. And so we think about it the right way now, and it's still a systemic problem in some places, but in the liberal world, it's the secular world, it's viewed as wrong. You'll go to prison for it, and you'll get given a hefty sentence for anything like any of those acts. And I was thinking, maybe there's a similarity here with when we're thinking about indoctrination, toxic indoctrination, because obviously we've pointed out that it needs to be toxic for it to be bad. And I'm thinking maybe in the future, people looking back will look back on this toxic indoctrination and will see it as a problem for all of those that religious people that say no, indoctrination's not bad, it can't be bad, it's just the right thing to do now when we're having these conversations.
Right.
And I just think it was an interesting thought, that unless we actually have these conversations now, and more people do have these conversations and start to point out the errors with certain types of indoctrination, it's never going to stop being a systemic problem. So that the future generations will look back and go, what was going on there? Why didn't anything get done sooner?
Well, I think, back in Greek society, Greek ancient society, they could get away with rape more easily because they didn't have social media, they didn't have television back then, so they could not broadcast things easily. Nowadays, with our technology, we can shine the light on things. Back then, they were sweeping it under the rug. Back then, they probably were bothered by it. The victims were bothered by it because the victims could feel the trauma, but they probably didn't realize that they were having trauma. They didn't know what to think about it. So maybe the trauma victims, the rape victims, they had to ignore it too because they didn't have the science to recognize the signs. So I hope I'm okay with commenting, using that information. I hope I haven't said anything controversial. I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying that,
fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course, all of what we were talking before the show, you've got citations for everything that you've been mentioning here tonight. So I will put links to all of those citations in the description. So if anyone wants to, double check what Matthew's been using, then please do check out the description.
Cool, good. Yeah, I'll definitely share those citations with you. So how are we on time?
We've got 10 minutes left for the hour. It doesn't matter if we go over though. It's that's absolutely fine. I'm not keeping to a strict schedule. So
Okay, so maybe we would like to get into fundamentalism. If indoctrination in of itself is not the ultimate source of the moral problem, then perhaps fundamentalism would be. But to really pin the blame on fundamentalism, we should define it.
yeah.
So the information that I found on this, the source I found on this is interesting because it is a 2020 volume written by top epistemologists. One of the authors is named Rick Peel, and it states that studies on fundamentalism is actually a stagnating field. And the publication actually rejects the two main models in the field that are used to explain why people become fundamentalists. The one model states that people get radicalized by social and political factors involving poverty and social isolation. They call that the radicalization model.
Mm-hmm.
The other model proposes that a person must have a personality pathology that turns them into a fundamentalist. And the reason why these two models are rejected in this volume is because the authors say they do not account for why some people become fundamentalists and others do not, since some fundamentalists can prove themselves to be normal people without psychiatric disorders. Now, I found that to be kind of I didn't really know what to do with that, but I still felt obligated to report on it because well, it kind of contradicts some things that I have believed about fundamentalism throughout the years.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I didn't look into that. I haven't actually looked into that field, so I didn't know that myself. And yeah, that's very interesting. And because what you would think, I mean, I have heard certain atheists try to argue away that these people who are trapped in fundamentalism, they have mental health problems and things, which is clearly is not right, because when you think about it, there's many people that all of us probably know somebody who's trapped inside a fundamentalist organisation who is absolutely sane. There's nothing wrong with them. They're absolutely
Right.
fine. They're lovely, caring, honest, genuine people. But so so yeah, I would definitely reject that study on
Well,
that basis.
so here's what I have to say. Here's my feelings and opinions on the radicalization model and the pathology model. I think that they should not be rejected completely. They are still useful theories because I do think that there are some fundamentalists whose beliefs are motivated by some kind of personality flaw or pathology, something social, something political. I do think that we
Yeah,
see that,
like
but it's not.
narcissism. A lot of narcissists
Yes, yes.
do end up in fundamentalist churches.
Right. So these models do help to explain some situations for fundamentalists. However, at the same time, I think that the situation is unique and different for every fundamentalist. I think a simple explanation could be this: for those fundamentalists who are mentally stable and sane and good people, and they simply make use of fundamentalism because it offers certainty. It's the quickest way to achieve coherence when things become incoherent in the external world
Yes.
for them.
The drawing too much on the hope, the hoping too so much that I think it also comes down to talking about the hope. It ties in with a conversation that I was having with a couple of philosophers on the channel a few weeks back. Cease to Know and Thomas Levi.
Okay.
We were talking about life and death in regards to religion and how the psychology of life and death actually works, and the philosophy behind that. And I think it's good that's a very important thing that we need to point out is that for a lot of religious people, this fear of death is the major thing that keeps them in religion, that keeps them believing in these falsehoods. Doesn't matter how much evidence you throw at some people, it's not a mental disorder or anything. It's just that they fear death so much, and that this
Right.
hope of an afterlife is so powerful to them that they've got the blinkers on. They're not going to take in any of the, or critically assess any of the information that you're giving them.
Right. Right. And I think that maybe this fear of death that you mentioned, I think it's in all of us. However, its intensity varies from person to person, and so maybe for the fundamentalists, their fear of death is more intense than mine is and yours is.
Hmm.
Um, and they're more obsessed with the unknown than we are. However, at the same time, I have to wonder if we atheists and secular humanists who speak out about this on social media, I have to wonder if maybe we're kind of obsessed with the unknown, including death and how life is going to transpire in the years to come. That unknown, it really bothers us too.
Of
But
course.
we deal with it in a different way, and we deal with it by getting on here and talking about this.
Yeah.
We're more comfortable with being rational about it. Well, at least we try to be rational about it as best as we can, because we don't really feel comfortable with pretending like we know. And I think that's the major problem with fundamentalism, is that it pretends to know.
Yeah.
So and
And
so
not
get
only that, though, not only that it just pretends to know it. When you were talking about death, and you were asking, well, why is it that certain fundamentalists have this heightened fear of death? I think I've got an answer to that, and because I remember being a Jehovah's Witness, and the amount of from the day that you're born, you've been indoctrinated into it. Big part of the indoctrination is showing you having you read verses, going to meetings and listening to sermons, and seeing imagery and that in the books and things, and it's all designed around death. It's all designed around building up that fear of death, and not only just death itself, but eternal damnation, and horrifying ways to die, and not having God's love and being without family members, and it's all heightened, and it's all part of that indoctrination. So it's not good enough for you just to have the natural fear of death that all humans have. It's something that they want you to think about every single day of your life. Every second that you're alive, you have to be thinking about death, because that's the only way that that's their control mechanism. If they can
yes.
get you thinking about that every single second of your life, then it's so much easier for them to peddle the misinformation to you.
Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, it feels very predatory on their end. Um, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It feels predatory. It seems predatory. However, I feel like we can achieve a better understanding of fundamentalists when we remember that, you know, these people are probably trying to do it from they're probably trying to do it with some good intentions, you
Of
know,
course.
minus the narcissists and the sociopaths, those, you know, that small population that likes to get into
Yeah.
religion. They like
You,
to occupy the seats of
yeah.
power, you know. Aside from them, I think that there are a lot of fundamentalists who, you know, they want us to focus on death. They want us to focus on some things surrounding that topic because maybe they're hoping that we'll achieve that, you know, a better understanding. You know, they have a prescribed road to peace that they're hoping that we can achieve with them. It's just unfortunate that they're not apprised on how that has mentally and emotionally afflicted us, and we can't really go back down that path again.
Exactly.
And you, and that's why, and I think that's why I tend to get really angry with fundamentalists in some conversations. Um, you know, and it's like I try to say some things to them that I feel or think that are very, very commonsensical, and when they don't respond in a way that I think is commonsensical, it really confuses me. I don't know what to say next. You know, that cognitive schema that I have set up, it collapses for me. So,
Yeah, I think
um,
it's tough for us all in that situation. It's big, and but I think the thing to remember when that anger does come, because it's something that we all get angry at as atheists and free thinkers, is just why can't they see things the way we do? Why can't they open their eyes, and see things for the way they are?
right.
But it's not that they're being malicious in the indoctrination or in the processes that they've got for, for teaching this mistruth. They fully 100% believe it to be true. They've been indoctrinated that way themselves. As you mentioned, they think that they are actually saving you by trying to do things the way that they're doing things. So and I think that's why we need to get back to what we mentioned earlier, which was this is a systemic problem within religion.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
it
a systemic problem. Yeah.
there's no one person to blame for what's going on there, and as a systemic problem, it's something that we all can actually work at trying to fix, trying to solve, trying to work a way around. Not only helping those that are still trapped inside of that,
Yeah.
to find a better way, but so in a sense, saving them from, because they're under the thumb of religion as well.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, we cannot blame one single person. I do like that idea, because I think we have to blame simply the human brain and how
Mm,
faulty it is, and the fact that human perception and memory and belief, they in of themselves are too faulty. We really cannot see objective reality at all times. Of course, science is our attempt at seeing objective reality, but we have so many blind spots that are pretty much hardwired into our perception that quite often the way the best way that some people feel they can fill up those holes is to subscribe to uh, some fundamentalist beliefs. Um,
yeah,
it's just unfortunate that quite often the dangerous path in fundamentalism is trying to impose your fundamentalism in public schools, where not everybody is consenting to your religious indoctrination that is not rooted in fact.